Hello. Welcome once again to Off the Shelf Books on Tour. Our book today is a memoir close to my heart, Jimmy and Me. It is all the memories, good, bad, and ugly, of having a special needs family member in the interaction of family and community. I think my guest is Joyce Poggi Hager, and you're brave.
Thank
You
you.
did well to write it, and it's got all the bumps and bruises and joys as well, thank you, God.
Thank you, Veronica.
Was it hard?
Some parts were hard, yes. Yes.
Cathartic?
Yes, very much so. The very first scene, the patterning scene that I wrote, I don't know how many, maybe 8 years ago now, I wrote it and I just burst into tears. And I don't think it was coincidental. This happened about 9 months after my mother died. And so, yeah, and then I kept writing another scene and another scene, and I didn't know I was writing a memoir until I wrote several essays, and I said to my husband, I think I might be writing a memoir.
But sometimes when I have a person who is troubled, a person who can't express what's bothering them because they don't really know themselves, I tell them to write it down.
Yes.
You can write it down, rip it up, and throw it away.
Yes.
But once you get it out,
Yes.
you feel released.
Yes.
Somebody else heard you, listened to you, you saw the words,
Yes.
and it's easier to go on.
It is, and the next time that I cried at the end, that's how I knew I was done.
Yeah.
I just burst into
Empty.
tears.
Yeah.
And there were a couple more difficult scenes with my mother in particular, or about my mother.
Mm-hmm.
Those were really difficult. I had to dig deep for those.
Yeah. Well, now this was 1956.
Right. My brother was born in 56. Yes.
Right. So that is well before 766 as we know it today, when special needs children have the equivalent, if not better, educational opportunities
Right.
than regular students, and I thank God for that.
Right.
But that was a tough time, and as with so many other special needs children at birth, your parents were told to institutionalize them, get rid of them.
That's right.
Don't you have other children, seek your joy there, and applause to your mom and dad saying, he's a baby.
Right.
He's our child. You
Right.
don't throw him away.
Right, absolutely. That was very common practice back then in the
Oh.
50s and 60s, and even beyond. But no, my mother was a tenacious woman. She was going to have none of that.
Good for her. And then patterning come in. And for those who don't understand patterning, and while I've seen it and I've heard of it, you did it. It's a process of cooperatively laying the individual on a table in, 14 or 15 people at every session?
There were five people, one for the head and one each for each limb. So there were 5 people, and it was done twice in the morning and twice in the evening for 5 minutes, then a half-hour interval of rest, and then another 5 minutes nonstop. So
But you had to have quite a core
Oh.
of neighbors,
yes,
friends,
Yes.
community,
Yes.
because the continuity
Right.
was what really mattered.
Right. So my mother's best friend, whom I call Aunt Anna, put together a schedule, and she recruited all of these neighbors. We lived in a big Italian neighborhood, and she recruited all these neighbors and put together this schedule, and every day we did this. Typically it was the mothers who came in the morning, and then the dads would come in the evening.
And isn't it interesting that some of the dads were uncomfortable and they didn't think they could, or they knew. And I find that following special needs children, they're some of the best friends I have in this world. And I like them better than grown-ups. But when a non-knowing individual meets our kids, and they're astounded, they think, they laugh, they can tell a joke,
They emote.
and they
Yes.
learn, they come away glowing more than the child that they spend time with.
Which is why, one of the messages in this book is that Jimmy is the greatest teacher of my life. He taught me life's greatest lessons: compassion, patience, tolerance, perseverance, discipline. He really is, and he still is.
And took you places that you never thought you'd be?
Well, I really, of course my parents were a huge influence, but I credit Jimmy and being Jimmy's sister for all of the success in my life, my personal and my educational success.
Well, I think that he would give it right back to you.
Thank
How
you.
old is he now?
He's 62.
And he's in a residential?
So he's in a supervised apartment. Actually, we just moved him into a new one. It's beautiful. Has one roommate, has his own place, but it's supervised by the ARC. The national organization that supports individuals with intellectual disabilities. And he's very happy there. He goes to a day program now that he's 62. He was working part-time, but he goes to the Easter Seals Day program, and they do a lot of active things. He golfs. He's really into golf now. He reads quite a lot. He reads the magazines, National Geographic, sporting magazines. He's a wizard with jigsaw puzzles. He taught himself how to use a tablet.
I was going to say, how about the computer? Did that
He
free
went
up?
He went out and bought himself a tablet and has taught himself how to use it.
Excellent.
He loves geography, so he's always researching places and things like that, and also sports, so he's always looking up figures, facts and figures. So he amuses himself quite well with that.
It's amazing to walk through, especially our elementary schools. In years gone by, those classrooms would be quiet.
Yes.
And the children would be sedate.
That's right.
Now every one of them has a tablet.
Right.
And every one of them are osmosising to what ticks,
right.
what interests them.
It's funny, I always thought that if Jimmy was born 1986 instead of 1956, he would have progressed further. The doctors back then diagnosed him as borderline educable. So he has a fascination with numbers too. So I think he, with the tablet, with the technology.
Right, free to do what he's capable
right,
of.
and the visual, the visual type of learning. But you're right, back then, there was one classroom. It was at the end of the corridor.
They unfortunately referred to it as the rubber room.
Yeah, typically it was next to the nurse's station. And there was any combination of young children and students in there. It could have been disciplinary issues, it could have been intellectual disabilities or anything.
And you could only learn as much as the teacher was capable
right.
of bringing in.
Right.
And everybody all at once didn't want to learn about May Day.
Right, and I mean, when Jimmy was in school, there was no right to a public education for people like him. It wasn't until 1971 when the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania was sued by a group of parents of children. And that was a landmark case, and it led to, obviously, a nationwide
766?
That's it, yeah. So, and that was in 1974, I believe Congress passed that law. So, I lived in the state where, that was a landmark
Thank
case.
You.
Yes.
As much as it brought forth as much of the opportunities that it brought with it, it's still progressing. They're still learning more. I just recently advocated for dogs. Help dogs, assistive dogs.
Yes.
Because a lot of schools say no dogs in the school.
Yeah.
I believe we have a teacher with a St. Bernard, a little young lady known worldwide with a Great Dane. But again, those are responsibilities that you and I didn't think of when we were in school.
Right.
Dogs have a tendency to poop when they have to poop. And I can see a teacher saying, I'm not picking that up. That's not, what I was hired for. So
right.
they had to go back and adapt the rules of accommodation. And thank God they're willing to do it. They are. But now, what was there for you? We now have siblings meetings.
Right, sibling support groups, sibling
was that ever there for you?
No, I mean, I thought I was the only one. And you read in this book, I really thought that I was the only one whose family had somebody different. Certainly nobody on our block, in our neighborhood, was like Jimmy. And so none of my cousins or, family friends that, we interacted with were. So I was the only one. I never knew any different. He was my brother, and this is who he was.
It's family.
So, but I never knew any different. But no, there was just as much, there was so little support and services for people like Jimmy. And of course there wasn't any for siblings. And I don't even know how much for parents either. I mean, my mother
No.
was investigating everything on her own.
And it was tough, really
You know,
tough.
now and then she would get a saged, person who, a teacher or
Another parent who had lived through it. That's
Right.
where you get most of your
right,
information.
exactly, yeah.
You know,
yeah.
and there's 100,000 books. But which one do you read?
Well, I think the reason my book is special is because it's written by a family member. There are so many books out there that are written by teachers, educators, physicians.
They never lived with a special needs person.
Exactly. So theirs is all research based. I lived with it,
And you survived.
Well, yes, and I
and
think
you
maybe
did-
I even thrived at
Yeah, I
some
was going
point.
to say you did, and you did very well, despite the fact that you didn't have that support. Did you have sibling support? Were your sisters
So,
aware that
yeah.
you were carrying the load?
They read the book right before it was published, and they said, we grew up in the same house. These aren't my memories. They were very supportive of the book. But theirs was a different story. So Jimmy and I were closest in age, and we were sandwiched by an older sister and a younger sister. So my older sister, Lynn, tended to be mommy's helper. And my younger sister, Allison, was the baby who was just full of life and, very witty and still is. And so, yes, they were, my parents ingrained a very strong sense of discipline and accountability in all of us. We're always on time. We're very responsible with our jobs. Our houses are always very clean and neat. So I think, yes, they were certainly very involved in Jimmy's life, but maybe not as involved because he and I were closest in age and went to school together. So we were always in school together, where Lynn was, 4 years ahead and Allison was 4 years behind me. So her memory isn't quite as vivid as mine since she was the youngest.
Now, I love the story of the spring cleaning because there's very few of us my age, that don't remember that. And in the old tub washing machine with the wringer.
Yes.
And the sheets were done on Saturday, and
Yeah.
you did the white clothes first, and then you did the dark clothes, and everything went out on the
Yes.
clothesline. I know people today don't even know what a clothesline is. Did Jimmy, did he have responsibilities, or was it all the girls?
He did. He did. I mean, it might not have been as much like that. My mother would say, "Jimmy, go out and clean the garage or make it look like neat."
Oh, I remember that, and it didn't.
Yeah, no.
No,
He and Allison were sent to the garage. But it's funny. His room, and even to this day, is neat as a pin.
Wow.
He's very organized. He likes containers. He has everything labeled. So yeah, he would have to bring out the trash and bring his plate over and wipe up the table and make his bed. We all had to make our bed. Put the clothes away, bring down the laundry. So yes, he was responsible. I think the women were probably more domestic than he was.
But in a lot of families, they skate. And I think that's I met a young lady one day, the family is walking towards me. Lovely young lady, adopted, very, very good kid. And I said hello to the sibling, to the mother, the father, and her.
Yes.
And what was the matter with me? Didn't I know she was the most important person in that family? And I was supposed to say hello to her first. So she kicked me right in the shins. And I said, well, that's a funny way to say hello, Karen, but if that's how you go. And she's never kicked me again. But I find that in a lot of families, the special needs person is treated special, which I think is unkind to the siblings who are carrying the excessive weight.
Yeah, well, certainly, when Jimmy walked in the room, the axis tilted, certainly, and it's still that way. And even now, I mean, his three sisters dote on him. That's for sure.
He's a rose in no man's land.
That's
he
for
can't
sure.
do anything right.
But again, he was responsible. And for example, and you read at the end of the book, after Hurricane Sandy ravaged my dad's house, Jimmy was right there with us, cleaning and sweeping and doing things. And we find that when you give him a little bit of responsibility, it's actually better. He'll come to my house and we'll finish up dinner. I'll say, Jimmy, please take the trash down. or can you help me with this, or Jimmy, you're strong, help me, can you lift this, can you carry this for me? Okay, you know, and he's like right there, okay, carry a case of water in or something.
But don't
like
you
that.
feel that with your own children or children that
course.
you're taking care of?
Of course.
I used to be a counselor at a YMCA, and they'd always bring me the troubled child because I'm known as the wicked old witch of the West. And I'd give them a broom and say, I have to sweep that whole parking area by 3 o'clock. And unless you want to pick me up off the ground and do the whole thing by yourself, here's a broom, let's get it done together.
Yeah.
And they would work so diligently
Yes.
that I could stand there like this and they'd clean it. And they were so proud that they were
Yes.
asked to do something,
Yes.
that they helped me out,
Yes.
that I wasn't bossing
Yes.
them around.
Yes, they want to be involved. They want to feel a part of things, and we find, and I found that, as I said, as recently as you know, his move. We moved into this lovely new apartment. Everything's lined up. I'll take care of it. So yeah, I think they're, you know, my parents drilled that into all of us. You know, they were from the greatest generation, and work was. It was a responsibility, it was accountability, it was also a duty, and it was honor for them
It's life.
to work. And so, yeah, that's how we grew up.
But God bless your daddy. More than that, he did Boy Scouts.
He did.
So he wanted space for a Boy Scout group in his church, and that I found the hardest part of the book, that your church let you down
On multiple occasions.
on too many occasions. And that always baffled my mind. That didn't seem to be Christian to me.
Right.
You know, God loves everybody in the pasture. You don't send your lambs elsewhere.
Right.
You don't say they're not capable, you know. And so as many brick walls as your father walked into, I did too, and they fell down.
Yeah.
But God bless him for doing Boy Scouts. But again, he took on the responsibility, which is a big responsibility.
Right, it was.
And there were very few people there to help him.
Right. Right.
And there were parents who said, oh, if you're dumb enough to do it, I'm smart enough to let you.
Yes, exactly. That was.
What do you dwell on? What is your favorite, most important memory? I could, like graduating from high school, or
No, I don't think it's that. You mean with Jimmy, or
either
just?
for both of you. I think you're tied together for life.
Oh, sure.
His accomplishments are yours.
Yes.
Your accomplishments are his. Did he like the book? Did you have to read it to him?
He didn't read the whole book. He saw the cover. He said, "Oh, that's our first day of school." And I said, "You remember that?" He said, "Oh, yes, I remember." That's his writing, by the way. That's how he signs his name. And I think it's interesting that I'm literally standing in his shadow in this cover photo. So he saw the book. He kind of browsed through it. He saw the photos, but you know, he wasn't.
It's not hot rods. It's not baseball.
No.
It's not golf.
No, he's like, okay, fine. Okay, Jimmy. You know, he knows it's a story of us growing up. He doesn't know some of the rough patches that I wrote about.
But their memory is phenomenal.
Well, I've always been told that I have a vivid memory.
But do you find that he has a memory beyond belief
He does.
remember that that's the first day of
Oh,
school?
yeah. Oh, yeah,
it's always specific on the things they want to
Oh,
remember.
he'll remember some things. I think, where did that come from?
Yeah, where's your shoes? I don't know.
Yeah. Or he'll say, I had such and such in the third drawer of my dresser, and it's not there. And so he's got a good memory for other things. And I don't know if there's other, you know, I never know really what's going on. Sometimes I think he just wants to
Return, retrogress. I find
not go in the past, and then there are other times where he is reminiscent, and he'll talk about the Philadelphia Flyers in this, you know, in the 1970s, and remember when we did this. So it just depends on his mood, how much he really wants to remember. Now that my parents are gone, he doesn't want to talk about them too much. I think it might be too painful for him. For me, it's comforting to talk about it, but for him, I think it's a little more painful.
Though that's altogether possible. I mean, we can teach, we can believe, but I don't know how you feel in your, you know, relationship with God. Nobody does. So I remember Super Son was at my father's burial at Allington, and he was very respectful and very well behaved, and the whole family was there. And the service was over and it was everybody's turning to head back to the limos, and he's standing at the open grave and he yells, "Grandfather!" And everybody stopped breathing because he hadn't expressed any feelings. My hubby walked over and said, "Bobby, did you want to say something to Grandfather?" He went, "Bye!" And he was the first one in the limousine. So you just don't know.
Yeah.
And sometimes, do you find them getting tired of, and how hard they have to work to put up with us?
Yeah, I think, well, he has 3 sisters who probably overmanage him and worry consistently. And the
they're
3 of
all
us,
smarter than the other one. You're smarter than
well, we all
Allison.
bring something different to the table, which is great. I tend to be the communicator with the social workers. My sister Allison sort of handles financial affairs. My other sister, Lynn, does some of the medical issues. So we all really complement each other. We're always having 3-way conference calls. We just had one yesterday about him. You know, what's going on, updating.
How lucky he is.
Updating. So yeah, I think sometimes he feels like we realize, okay, we just have to back off a little bit. We might be micromanaging. I mean, it is his apartment. It is, you know, when he moved into his new apartment, you know, "Jimmy, do you want this here?" No, I don't want that anymore.
And that's what you want for him.
Exactly. Let him make these decisions. So yeah, I mean, I think he's perfectly capable of those things. I do think at this, you know, especially with my parents' passings and a couple other you know, friends and family from the past leaving, he's more aware of his mortality now, and I think
Aren't we all?
Yes. So
Well, we're going to pause for a minute, and then we're going to come back, and you're going to read several paragraphs so that those who have listened so far can understand what a good writer you are.
Oh, thank you.
And how very much they can identify, and if not, they should. See you in a minute. Bye.
Twice a year for spring and fall cleaning, Mom grabbed the rooftop with both hands and shook the house out the way she shook the dining room tablecloth out the front door after a holiday dinner. Mom dusted and vacuumed every day, sometimes twice. She could often be seen with a rag in her hand wiping surfaces, tables, counters, appliances, doors, windows, Venetian blinds. Despite this, the spring and fall cleaning meant deep cleaning, as she called it. Every April, Mom would attack the closets for a week while we were in school. Even when I phoned her 30 years later and asked what she was doing, she'd answer, "Cleaning out a closet." By the weekend, the trash barrels out back burst with bags of frayed bath towels, outdated over-the-counter medicine, broken toys, stained or torn clothes, and beat-up shoes. The closets became super neat again, with the hangers all going in the same direction, shoes lined up, and new bath towels neatly folded in perfectly aligned stacks. One spring Saturday morning, I was jarred awake by the blaring sounds of John Philip Sousa's marching band playing on our stereo. I groaned, knowing what it meant. "Wake up!" Dad yelled from the bottom of the stairs. Although Dad's cheerful voice indicated a good mood, I knew a day of chores lay ahead, with Mom giving lots of directions. I was convinced other girls my age played while I worked. However they amused themselves, I was certain it didn't involve a dust rag. By the time we got out of bed, Dad and Mom had already tackled the first floor windows, cleaning and raising the storm windows and installing the brush-scrubbed screens, and were ready to reach the second floor. Dad would position himself on a wooden ladder outside facing Mom inside with Windex in one hand and paper towels in the other. "Babe, you missed a spot," she'd tap, tap, tap on the window with the nail of her pointer finger. Once the windows were squeaky clean, Mom scoured every inch of the 3 bedrooms, ceiling to floor. I awaited my instructions, knowing Mom had a detailed plan of action for the day. "Joyce, empty this bucket of dirty water in the toilet and refill it with Pine Sol and hot water from the tub," she said. "Here, Mom," I said, returning with the pail. "Okay, now take this rag, dunk it in the bucket, then wring it out and wipe down all the baseboards." I didn't know why I was chosen to get on my knees for that job when Allison was smaller. "Joyce, you're as slow as molasses," she said, tapping her foot while holding the vacuum extension in her hand. "Come on, let's get done." What was molasses anyway? She used that phrase with me a lot, like when she'd send me to get her cigarettes or the encyclopedia. It hurt my feelings when she said I was slow as molasses, even though I didn't know what it meant. I don't recall her using that phrase with Jimmy or my sisters. The first time she told me I was slow as molasses, I thought she said slow as my ass is, and I was shocked. Then I thought it might be a curse word. I knew by the tone of her voice that slow as molasses wasn't a compliment, and didn't ask her the definition. She'd probably have given me her pat response. Look it up in the dictionary.
Thank you. I asked you to read that particular segment because to me it shows that you lived your life. Jimmy didn't impede your life as a family. He was marched with all of you and life went on. And I don't think there's a sibling who could pick this book up and not identify and giggle all through it.
Thank you.
Because it is a community effort, it is a family effort. And the majority of families that have brought our children to accomplishment in this day and age, applause. You were a forebearer, and you and your family led the way for many, many to follow, I'm sure. Thank you. Will you write another?
Thank you so much. I hope so. I plan to.
Well, we would look forward to you bringing it to us. Please say hello to Jimmy for us.
I will. Thank you very much, Veronica.
Please look into this book. It's a good story, it's well written, and it's a tremendous resource. That's it for Off the Shelf Books on Tour. I'm Veronica Andrews. Have a good week. Bye.